The first model that we're going to look at that has to do with how to facilitate good dialogue was developed by an American systems psychologist called David Kantor. So he came to be an organizational consultant through his work with families. So in his work with families, he placed microphones in different families' homes and recorded their conversations. And then he discovered that the more healthier systems, their conversations was characterized by having roughly 25% of different kind of speech act. They had 4 different kinds of speech acts, and each speech act was represented by roughly 25% of the conversation. Whereas in the more dysfunctional systems, 1 or more of these speech acts would be maybe even altogether missing. And the 4 speech acts that Kantor proposes should be part of any good productive conversations are moves, follows, opposes, and bystands. And moves is just somebody, in order for a conversation to be good, then somebody has to propose something. Somebody has to say, I think we should do this. Or I think we should go for this market segment. Or I think we should focus on solving this problem. Or something like that. You have to propose something. And in a sense, it doesn't matter if the first proposals are bad. It's just the moment somebody proposes something, other people have something to react to. So if it's a good proposal, if you think it's a good proposal, you might follow it, you might build on it. If you see problems with it, you can react to it by pointing out those problems and so on. But if nobody makes a move, then you will have a conversation with no direction. And you sometimes see this in organizations. It's like, what should we do? I don't know. What do you think we should do? I don't know. What do you think we should do? Right? And it doesn't go anywhere. So this is very important. Part of a good conversation is somebody should make a move. The next thing that is part of any good conversation is the speech act of the follow. So that means when somebody has made a move, somebody else has to build on it. They have to go, yes, that's a really good idea, and we could maybe do it like this. So somebody says, I think we should go for this market segment. And somebody else says, I think that's a really good idea, but I think we can narrow it in this way. Or somebody says, I think we should solve this particular problem. And somebody else says, yes, that's a really good idea. And maybe we can solve it in this particular way. We can use this technology. We can use these suppliers. We can do something else. So once somebody has made a move, it's important for a good conversation that other people jump in and put flesh on it and build on it so that you create something together. If there are no followers, then there will be no completion. You might end up in a conversation where a lot of people put in a lot of ideas, but nobody picks up on anybody else's ideas. And by the end of the conversation, the whole conversation is like this big graveyard of unfinished ideas. So follow is a really important part of a productive conversation. The next speech act, which is also really important, is oppose. So you have to be able to spot the weaknesses. You have to be able to oppose things. And so somebody is making a move, say, I think we should focus on this market segment. And then somebody says, well, it's not very big. So we would have to have a huge market share, and there's in order for this to be profitable. And it kind of put boundaries on how much we can scale later. So there are issues with it. Or maybe somebody else says, I think we should focus on solving this particular problem. And somebody else says, sure, but actually there's some really good solutions out there already. Or maybe somebody says, this should be our value proposition. And somebody else says, yeah, but that value proposition is really easy to copy. So that's a problem. So in order for a conversation to be really productive, there have to be people opposing moves also. because without opposition, there will be no course correction. Without opposition, then you end up being very excited about what you're doing, but then when it meets the real world, it has no strength because you didn't oppose it before. Like when we are doing the pitching exercises, for example, that's also where you can get some feedback from other groups. And this is exactly to bring in some of this productive opposition that can help strengthening your ideas, strengthening your business model, strengthening your value propositions. So there's a greater chance that it will be successful when with its meeting, when it meets the real world. If you have move and follow and oppose, you can see how now you already have a really good conversation, but there's one more speech act that we really need, and that is the bystand. And the bystand is the speech act where somebody kind of takes a step back, take a broader perspective, and comment on what the conversation is about. Are we even talking about the right things? So maybe you will be very engaged in developing your business plan. You're talking about your business plans, like who do we serve, what problems do we solve, how does that connect with the resources we have and our cost structure and all these kind of things. You're fully engaged in figuring out what are the puzzle pieces and how do they fit together. And then maybe somebody takes a step back and says, actually, I think we're not finished talking about our value proposition. And I think we need to do that more, of finish that more of before we start engaging too much in the fleshing out the business plan. And a story that I have from a manager, I was working with a manager in one-to-one executive coaching, and he told a fantastic story that really shows what a bystand is and why it can be very powerful and contribute a lot to a conversation. So he was talking about how the senior management team was meeting and they were sitting together, and they had purchased a new building, and they were discussing what to do with parking. So you have a lot of employees coming to the new building, a lot of them come in cars, and they have to have a place to put their cars. And there were a few good options. Maybe they could purchase a parking space. Maybe they could give out vouchers to pay for parking on public parking places to their employees. And they were discussing, maybe there was one parking space that was cheaper, but it was a little further from the building. And there was another one that was more expensive, but it was right next to the building. So that would be kind of pros and cons. And they were discussing this. And after everybody had a lot of opinions on this topic, and it was really like a heated debate. And after a while, one of them put up their hand and say, look, the price difference between the options that we're discussing is actually not that big. And we have just spent 1 hour of the senior management's time discussing this, which probably cost more than what we could save by picking the best or the optimal solution in terms of parking space. Let's just pick one and move on, because it's really not worth our time to be discussing this for this long. That illustrates how important it is to have that bystand, because sometimes conversations get like in these little loops where you're just discussing the wrong thing. And it's so important that somebody can take that step back and say, we're not talking about the right thing. This is a more important thing to talk about. Or maybe we're not talking about it in the right way, or so on. Another example for a bystand would be, maybe you have a conversation where, I see this all the time in management teams. You have a lot of movers and you have a lot of opposers. And so somebody throws out a move, they throw out a suggestion, and then somebody else points to a flaw in that suggestion and throw out their own suggestion. And then somebody else points out a flaw in that suggestion and throw out their own suggestion. And sometimes you have this move oppose, move oppose, move oppose, move oppose, move oppose. And maybe somebody makes a bystand and say, look, right now we just have moves and opposes, but we have no follows. So that will be a problem. This is why we're not getting anywhere. Can you see how bystands is really this broader perspective that can help ensure that you are talking about the right things and that you are talking about the right things in the right way. So these 4 speech acts are really important to have in your conversations, to upgrade your conversations. And part of being a good leader of conversations is that you hone your skill to listen to a conversation and get a sense of, are all the speech acts represented? Are there certain speech acts that are missing? And if there are certain speech acts that are missing, then how do I invite them in? And you can basically invite in speech acts in one of 2 ways. Either you can supply the speech act yourself. So if nobody's doing any follows, you do the follows. If nobody doing any moves, you do the moves. Or you can ask questions or invite other people to do it. So for example, maybe you see nobody's opposing and you can say, this is really nice what we're talking about. Can anybody see a problem? Right? By asking the question, can anybody see a problem? You are inviting other people to oppose. And if you are in doubt of how to make moves, how to follow, or how to make follows, opposes, or bystands, then you can just here's a couple of sentences that you can just think about completing. So if you want to make a move, just complete this the sentence, I suggest we talk about, or I think we should decide to, or my proposal is that we something, right? If you just say those words and complete that sentence, you will have made a move. In the same way, follows, you can say something like, I agree that, and then complete it, or I support this suggestion, and then fill in details, or let's do as Chris says, or as somebody else is saying, and then you build on it. It's very much this yes and approach. In the same way with the opposes, if you complete the sentences, I see things differently, or I would challenge that, or I would like to play the devil's advocate, or I see a problem with that, that's good ways of making opposes. And with the bystands, maybe you can say something like, I noticed that, or there's a difference between this or that, or what I'm observing is. So if you complete those sentences, that's a good way to make bystands. Good. So let's take a break here, and I would like to invite you in your groups to just have a little, maybe personally first have a little reflection on which of these speech acts do you feel come very naturally to you, and which of these speech acts would you not be so natural to you. So pick one speech act that you think is the one that comes most easy to you, and one speech act this is the speech act that you feel comes most difficult to you, or that you maybe just for whatever reason don't engage in often. And then in your groups, talk about, if you think back at the conversations you have had, which speech acts are prevalent in your communication, and are there certain speech acts where you say, well, when we talk together, we actually don't do much of that. So just have a little reflection on that, and also reflect on how might you bring in more of the speech acts that are missing, both how might you practice the kind of speech acts that you might not be so comfortable with, and on a group level, how might you, what could you do to bring in more of the speech acts that you don't engage in so often. So just have a few minutes for that.